and welcome to episode number 93 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. This is your host, Blue Tank, Christina. With me, as always, are my fellow tanks, and they're beautiful colors, but not as beautiful as my bluish hue. I have the red tank, Kellen. He's sitting to my right. I have the orange tank, Neelan. He's sitting diagonally.
This is specific.
This is important. And I have Mark, the green tank, sitting directly across.
I can attest to the fact that I'm sitting directly across from Christina.
So we've done such a bad job of figuring out what listeners of the podcast are called that I feel like the most common one is tankers, and I really don't want them to be called tankers. I've heard it like a couple times in our Discord, yeah.
What about tankies? That's way cuter.
Yeah, I guess you could go military.
Tanky is a
cadets.
person. So.
Yeah, cadets. But that's too
No.
I feel like Barragers was going around, but
Tankies.
I don't like that.
You tell us what you want to be called.
I tried to stay home and have a nice, relaxing Sunday evening, and I was not allowed. Anyways, this is a board game about board games.
This is a board game?
This is a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. I said it right that time, Kellen, even though the other version is more true for this group.
What was the other version?
Oh, the other version was something like podcast about board games, latest hotness, and how to like screw over your friends even when you're winning.
That's right.
If you're Kellen. So,
all right.
anyways.
If she stays around, I still retain 1/3 voting power in all votes.
No, you
Agreed?
split a third of a vote.
Absolutely not.
Wait, I only get 50% of a third?
No, you get no vote. Well, no, you can dilute.
You each get a cent.
That's worse than 50 cents to the dollar, guys.
Votes are by household, so you each will get 1/6 vote.
That's in the code of conduct.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of service.
Today we are going to talk about takebacks. So specifically...
Tap, no take back.
What? Yeah, tap, no take back.
Yeah.
Except our group does a lot of take backs. So we want to talk about when take backs are okay, which games they're okay in, when you don't feel about them, when they go too far, all of those fun things. But before we talk about that, as always, we will be talking about the games we played. So who would like to start?
Tonight on Board Game Barrage, when takebacks go too far.
There's a title right there.
Okay, so Kellen, what have we been playing?
All right, we're going to talk about a game now called Air, Land, and Sea.
Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
Yeah, wait, Callan, don't we hate this game?
We want to make a very strong public service announcement that Land, Air, and Sea is not the game Heroes of
Land, Sea, and Air.
Land, Sea, and Air. Please, whatever you do not play Heroes of Land, Sea, and Air.
No.
Air,
What?
sea, and land.
I don't know what it is. Do not play Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, as you will have a bad time and you will feel bad about yourself. But if you want to play a great game, a great two-player card game that came out this year from Arcane Wonders is called Land, Air, and Sea. This card game has...
Air, land, and sea.
Well, you're looking at the box. You're cheating.
No, it's right next to you, too. You could
The
have
box
looked at
is
it.
way past you.
No,
Air, Land, and Sea.
I took
Air, Land,
an
and Sea.
eye glance.
Air, Land, and Sea. Air, Land, and Sea is an 18-card two-player game that is quite unique while still feeling really familiar to the Battle Line, Shotten-Totten, Hanamikoji. I'm sure that's butchered pronunciation. But in this game, there are 3 theaters. There is land, there is air, there is sea, and there are 6 cards numbered 1 through 6 for each of those theaters. A game will start by players getting 6 cards each, and then 6 cards will be out for that round. So the information that you have is 1/3 of the information that is available in the game. You will take turns playing cards to different theaters, so you must play a land card to a land theater. Cards have effects on them that are either one-time use or persistent effects that last throughout the round. Also, what you can do is any card can be played face down to be worth 2 points in a theater, and you don't have to play it to its specific theater. So, in a very straightforward round of this game, everyone would play the 6 cards, little card effects happen that flip over other players' cards, that allow you to move cards and do little things, and then at the end of the round, whoever has 2 of the 3 theaters will win that round and get 6 points. And you need 12 points to win the game. So if you win 2 rounds like that, you win the game. What makes the game interesting is your ability to withdraw. At any point on your turn, instead of playing a card, you can say, I can't win this round. I'm out. And when you do that, depending on when you withdraw, the other player gets graduating amount of victory points from 1, 2, 4, or all the way to the 6. So that means if you know you're going to lose at any point, you can just say, hey, I want to keep this going. I'll give you 3 points. I'll give you 4 points instead. And that really, really elevates this game from one that feels a little incidental. Like the powers are enough that it's not a sheer game of wits. There's some f***ery to it, so to speak. But the ability to withdraw really, really takes this from something good to something that's like, wow, this is challenging some of those games like Hanamikoji and Battle Line and Lost Cities. I know Christina and Neelan have played this. How do you guys feel about land, air, and sea?
Air, land, and sea. I loved it. So within literally 30 seconds of the game starting, this doesn't happen very often, I was just like, oh my gosh, this game is amazing. Because you kind of have your cards, you plan out your strategy, and then instantly something happens where your strategy is destroyed. And so then you look at your cards and it's just like so beautifully tactical because you suddenly find something like, oh my gosh, I wasn't planning this, but this is perfect. And it counters exactly what Kellen just did. And like Kellen said, because of all of the chances for your strategy to be ruined, it can seem like there's a lot more luck involved, but I think you are given a lot more agency because you have the decision to withdraw at specific times. So I just thought this was so much fun. I loved it.
Yeah, it's this beautiful mix of being strategic and tactical in the way you're describing, where you look at your hand at the start and like, okay, this goes there, and then I can do this, then I can do this. I hold this big card that's going to win me the game at the end. But then obviously the other player messes that up, but then you just see secondary uses for everything.
Right, exactly.
Every turn, the contents of your hand and what you're able to do with that changes and transforms in this interesting way based on what's been happening in previous turns. And then you might get to a point where, okay, I've just been wrecked by the turn of this card or by this play of this card. And then there's that second tough decision. Like, well, I'm not just going to play this out. Maybe this is a tactical withdrawal position. It just has so many good decisions regardless of how the game is going at all points, especially as the larger game advances, like beyond the first couple of rounds, depending on how many points your opponent has. The options of withdrawing get tighter and tighter because if I withdraw too late, then you might still get the win. So it just keeps adding layers as you get deeper and deeper into it. There's enough sort of facility in the cards to allow for cool little combos, little tricks and things like that, which I thought was really, really good. Yeah, I really, really like this.
Yeah, I think the combo aspect of it is really good too, because I started thinking like, okay, I'm beginning to memorize all these cards after a few plays. Is it going to get boring? I know everything that's in play. Obviously, I know 1/3. But as I was having that thought, Neelan made this beautiful combo that I absolutely did not see coming, and I thought I had won, and then the very last card he played destroyed me, and it was so beautiful and amazing.
I think sometimes you can hype up a micro game and it's not actually that interesting. It's like interesting for being a micro game, and this doesn't have that feeling underneath it at all that it's silly or just a micro game. It feels really in depth. I think you're going to love it, Mark.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The way you guys are talking about it is getting me super excited to play it. For those of you who've played Hanamikoji and or Battle Line and or those games, this almost feels like superior to those based on what you're telling me. I don't know.
I've not played Battle Line, but I think it might beat out Hanamikoji for me.
So Hanamikoji is way more restricted in what you can do.
Right.
And that's both interesting and also maybe a little less fun. It feels more tense because you only have those 4 options. This is certainly simpler than Battle Line. Maybe Battle Line is one more step up in the weight department.
Okay.
But you should borrow it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I'm already working on the Pokemon re-theme. So for anyone who knows me, that is a very good sign.
Of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea?
Yeah.
How many Pokemon
No,
re-themes?
not Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea,
God,
Mark.
Be careful. Public service
you.
announcement. Do not listen to Mark.
Of Air, Land, and Sea?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So how many Pokemon re-themes are you currently working on?
2.
Okay.
But, well, there's the Splatoon El Grande re-theme too kicking around, and that could be Pokemon, but I don't. I just think that like the amount of people who want to play, if I took like a heavy Euro game, and I was like, let's make Great Western Trail about Pokemon.
Right.
I'm limiting my audience to like me and like Woggers from our Discord.
Sure. Right.
I want to say very briefly, because I think it is maybe important, at least as far as I'm concerned. This is a World War II theme, which is normally a huge turnoff for me in any game, but it really, really works in the context of the game. Like the idea that you have these multiple fronts and the war is just not going in your thing, so you do this tactical retreat and regroup and come back. It just feels weirdly thematic for how small and simple the game is.
Art is cool too. I was surprised. I was worried I wasn't going to like it because it's World War II themed.
But don't be colorblind.
Yeah, if you are colorblind like I am, the colors of the theaters are green, gray, and blue-gray. And then the back of the cards is black-gray.
So don't worry, just wait for the Pokemon retheme and your color issues will no longer exist.
That is Air, Land, and Sea from Arcane Wonders. You should absolutely pick it up unless you find the word heroes anywhere in the title, and then please stay away for your own safety.
Despite what Mike says.
Yes.
Neelan, what have you been playing?
I've been playing, well, three of us. Christina hasn't played this, unfortunately, but I've been playing Menara. Menara is a cooperative dexterity game.
Isn't that a Jewish thing that you light around December?
I think that's a menorah.
Oh, sorry.
Mark.
That was a religious joke.
This was recommended to us pretty frequently after the episode where we spoke about dexterity games. A lot of people reached out to us to say, you have to try Menara. And then when I saw the premise as a cooperative strategic dexterity game, I was very, very intrigued. And I'm happy to say that it lives up to both the expectation by the audience and what that type of game entails. So the way Menara works is you have a bag full of multiple colors of columns that are just like little wooden columns. You have a bunch of shaped floor tiles of various shapes and sort of colored circles on them. The circles represent where you can place matching color columns. On your turn, you're going to draw a card, and these cards have different difficulties, and that card will tell you, place a column, fill up a floor with columns if you can, move a floor up a level, move a column up a level. So there are different sort of tasks of varying difficulties.
Although most of them are place some number of columns.
Exactly. The large majority of them are just placing
Place
columns.
between 1 to 4 columns, usually 1 to 3 columns.
Right. Once you've filled up one of these wooden tiles with columns at the end of your turn, you then get to place the next in a stack of floors. So this could go, and probably will go, on top of an assembled array of columns. So you're gradually building the structure up, and if you can imagine this, it's now alternating between cardboard floors, wooden columns, cardboard floor, wooden column, all the way up. The aim of the game is to get it high enough so it's, depending on the difficulty, let's say in a normal difficulty game, 4 levels high. If you cannot complete a task on a card you draw, you add another card to the difficulty. So if you're ever in a position where you literally cannot complete the card, the game gets harder. The game ends when either you run out of columns, you run out of floors to place, or you run out of cards to pull. And if you're satisfying the win condition at that point, then you've collectively won. If not, you lose, or if at any point the structure collapses, you've lost. What's super interesting about this is it becomes this array of decisions that you have to make in your turn. Are we going to be completing a floor? Do we have the right combination of colors we need to progress? Is there enough structural integrity to even place another floor? It's almost like this exercise in sort of mathematical architecture of like, where is the center of gravity on this floor? Where can I place columns safely? Do I even have the right columns? So if I have to place 4, I'm able to do it. I really, really liked this. The games we played of it, the last one especially, came down to a single move which would have won us the game and then collapsed the whole structure. It's tense in the ways you'd want it to be for a strategic co-op game while still being like a pretty satisfying dexterity puzzle. I really liked it.
I also enjoyed it a lot. I don't know how it'll hold up to multiple players, 'cause I feel like with dexterity games or with building games like Junk Art and games like that, I find myself very excited about them initially, and then that excitement tends to wane fairly quickly. But in our play of Menara, I had a blast, and yeah, it just built that crescendo of that last move, and we were all around the table as Dan, who's our fourth, was placing that last piece on that could have won us the game, or as it did, end up losing the game. And as Neelan was alluding to, I think there are a lot of interesting decisions to make when you're playing the game. So it's not only relying on the dexterity aspect. There is the decision of what level of difficulty a card you're going to draw. There is the idea of, do you want to build a more stable base at the expense of taking more time, or do you want to start pushing up to try to achieve that height requirement? Because there were times we had the choice of potentially expanding out to build a more solid structure, but then the question was, do we have enough time to build a solid structure and also achieve the height requirement? So I just thought it's a very cool stacking game, in my opinion.
I will dissent, and I will dissent quite strongly. I had a number of problems with Menara that I think are game-breaking, in my opinion. So the first thing you do on your turn is a game of hand management. So you draw 4 colored columns in your hand, but there's also an array of 6 of them that are out on the board. And so your hand is actually any combination of that 10 columns, 6 that are public and 4 that are in your hand. And then you play the worst game of hand management that I've ever played in my life, which is you look at the available places to place a column and you decide what to do with the 10 columns that you have available. But we're talking about a hand management part of the game is hand management, and there are only 5 colors that we're talking about, and you have 10 options. It's inane and almost just gets in the way of what the game actually is. 2, you can alpha quarterback the shit out of this game. Like, to the point that my third point is that where you place is dictated by a deck, and the best way to play the game is to try hard the shit out of that deck, because you have to memorize what's come and what hasn't come out, to the point that we as a group were deciding, well, if there's only one left in the stack, maybe we can just flip it over and look at what it is, because otherwise we have to sit there and try to math out what card is left in that stack. And then on top of that all, at the end of the day, it's a stacking game, but the game ends when someone screws up. So a dexterity game is light, is fun, is friendly, and yet, you could be 40 minutes into this game and then someone just accidentally messes up and ruins the whole structure, and that's not fun for anyone. It's not fun for them, especially. I screwed up the first game earlier than should have been, perhaps, and felt really dumb and really bad about it. And so it's this weird mishmash of like a Euro-type decision-making process, a solo game for one player, and then a dexterity stacking game where it's not fun to see anyone lose because then everyone loses. It's funny when Neelan loses in Men at Work because we all laugh at him.
I love that.
Well, because it's competitive.
No, I'm with you.
So I just don't get this. Despite all that, I will say that in the end of our second game of it, I was getting into it and getting excited about winning or accomplishing it. But I don't see how this is... Like, it's approaching, and I know we're not going to get into definitions, it's approaching an activity as opposed to a game for me, where it's like a solo puzzle game where one person can quarterback the shit out of it, and then if anyone's hands are shaking because they've had too much caffeine, you all lose. Great. What a fun time.
So I'll give you my take on your 3 points. The hand management thing, I think, might have felt a little inelegant to me, but I think it does serve a good purpose, because if you're going to have a rule where columns need to be placed on the corresponding color, if you don't have that hand management thing and you draw a bad hand of columns, then the game gets bad more quickly.
Right, and I think that that's exactly right. And I'll bet you that it started with an array of 2 options, and then that just felt too punitive, too punishing, and then they went to 3, and then they went to 4. And it gets to the point where you have a bigger hand available outside, like for everyone, than in your hand. And then it's not even, at what point is it hand management? If you could just replace any with the whole bag.
I think it led to some interesting choices in our game, because there were times where I had 4 columns and, maybe they worked or maybe they didn't, whatever. But there were times where I was wanting to seed some of my columns in hand to the shared pile, because I knew that the next player maybe didn't have enough good columns.
Right.
If all 4 of my columns definitely work and Neelan is next in line and he has none that work, I would put 2 in or put 1 in and just give him a chance to do it.
But what I'm saying is that the answer to that problem was so self-evident every single time that there wasn't even a decision to be made. And if there was a small decision to be made, it was getting quarterbacked for you by someone either before or after you.
That's fair. That's fair.
Have you played a game with worse hand management?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not even gonna. Yeah, I don't know. But
you won't engage with me?
I'll engage with you. I don't know. Does Bloodhood Clock Tower have hand management? Your point's taken, but I just think the number one thing is it does solve I have a bad hand of columns. I mean, maybe there's a better way to do it, but that's just, I think it's a good fix for that. The hand of cards, your second issue, what was it specifically?
It's specifically that the best move in a Euro puzzle environment is to have memorized the makeup of the 1, 2, and 3 deck.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where you're shuffling through the discard going, which one...
Right.
Yeah, I see that.
It's fun. It's fun when you're in the discovery phase like we were in.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know and you kind of just go, you make heuristic like leaps.
Yeah.
But the more you play and the more you try hard it, the less fun that will be.
And I think that's true and is necessarily inelegant. And, I could imagine us playing with that with a face down discard and not even think too hard about what's left in the deck. But the rules does have a page which is literally these are all the cards in each tier of deck. So I do wonder if it's intentionally encouraging it, which I don't think I even agree
we should
with.
get a whiteboard and we can put all of them up, and then we'll put you in charge of the marker, Neelan. And so every time one of them is drawn, you can cross it out.
Yeah.
No, and then we
I'm
can
with
have
you.
Dan calculate the probabilities that when in the one pile, well, you have a 77% chance of drawing something that you can't play.
I think I would lean towards playing it without allowing that, honestly, next time, because I don't think that's a fun part of the game or a necessary part of the game.
But is that a problem until you get to the end of the deck? Really?
Not really. But even at that point, I just don't think I would care enough to like evaluate what's
But
left in the deck.
I get what you're saying, and I can see that argument. And I think maybe upon more plays, maybe it would be an issue for me, but I don't know.
I think that my biggest bias here, and something that Neil and I talked about off podcast, is that the extent of a rules explanation for a dexterity game is hovering somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes for me.
Yeah.
And if it goes above that, I go, I'm out.
Sure.
You know, you guys keep trying to get me. I know you all want to play with me. SEAL Team Flicks. Like, I don't think I'm going to play it with you because I don't think there's any way I'm going to like it.
And I will say that your third point is something I hadn't really considered, but it does feel not super great that the loss condition of a co-op game is sort of on the shoulders of one person. I think that becomes a big problem for you. It's maybe a function of you not playing in a great group. Like, you shouldn't be in a situation where if you make a mistake, you feel really bad because you let the team down. But I mean, obviously that's a natural thing to feel, but I get it. I think that's a very valid criticism for sure.
I think one slight mitigation I would say on that is that you failing in Menara does feel a little bit predicated on everything that's come before, right?
Sure.
So it doesn't feel like, oh, I lost this purely of my own volition. But I do get the point.
It did in the first game.
Yes, that's sure.
And yeah, I can see, like Kellen saying, like, you know, we've built up a fairly big structure, and then just because of a
small slip,
the entire thing breaks down. I mean, you might not even be upset at the person, but it sort of lessens the game. It sort of makes the fact that one small slip can end a game feels not great.
Sure.
I hope, and I've stated my biases throughout this, like for the person who this sounds interesting, I think it's quite interesting. But a co-op game is in the impossible situation of both preventing quarterbacking to the best of its ability while also, like, if you can't allow one player in the cooperative game to lose the game, then you have to equalize out, and then you're quarterbacking again, and there's only one player, even though it's a co-op game. So it's an impossible situation. It was never going to be something I was going to be super interested in. It's super bright and colorful.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Play Riff Raff. Play Riff Raff.
I will with your copy. Boom! Do you know about this?
No. Wait.
You don't want to know.
He got me. He tricked me in a math trade.
I done
He
got
will.
him.
He traded. You traded
Accidentally.
And now I'm just trying to sell it for the highest price. I don't
never trade with Mark.
I took
Anyone
your baby
who
and
listens
now I'm
to this.
selling it.
He says he's
God.
traded with listeners. Have you guys listened to this podcast? You're gonna get got.
Kellen got. Well, I guess I got too because I liked playing that game.
But yeah, I think that's all we have to say about Menara.
Cool. Oh, I'm the host.
Cool, guys.
I was wondering why they were all looking at me expectantly. Gosh, I was not planning for this, guys. This is hard. Okay, next, Mark.
Yes.
What are we going to talk
What question
about?
do you have for me?
What have you been playing with us
Well,
and other people, maybe?
Yes, including yourself and everybody else at this table. We all played Inish with the expansion Seasons of Inish. Is that right? Mm-hmm. We're butchering every single title that we're talking about here. So this is Seasons of Inish, the new expansion for Inish. This is a game that I have felt like I should like more than I do in the past. We haven't played it with the expansion, but I was hoping in playing with the expansion that I would improve my stance on it. So the way Inish works is the biggest conceit is that it's a card drafting game. There are 17 cards in the game, just 17.
In a 4-player game. Well, Seasons of Inish, one of its strong points is that it adds a 5th player, which would add 4 new primary action cards.
Got it. Oh, so there are, if we play with 5 players, there'd be 4 more cards introduced?
Yeah, I have them.
Oh, and they are based on 5 players. They're 5
They're
players.
different
specific.
cards, yeah.
Okay, cool. So the way that base Inish works is that there are 17 cards that will dictate all the actions you take in the game. So everything you do in this game, pretty much the base actions are going to be predicated on these 17 cards. Every round of the game, 1 card is removed, so nobody has perfect information, and then the rest of the cards are drafted. So at the end of the draft, you're going to have 4 cards that are going to be dictating what you're going to do in that round for the game. So what you're trying to do is, what your goal is to achieve one of 3 possible win conditions. And the way to remember these win conditions is the mark of the beast, 666, because they're all predicated on the number 6. So you can either be in 6 territories. So the game starts as a map of 4 pieces, and then you can expand on it through an action on one of the cards to add pieces to the board. And if you ever get onto 6 pieces of the map in any form, as long as you're on 6 areas, that is one of the win conditions. Another win condition is that when you have a majority of figures in a region or on a piece, you are considered the chieftain. Then anybody else on that piece are sort of like your subjects. So if Kellen had 3 figures on one piece and Neelan and I had 2 each, Kellen has more figures on that territory than Neelan or I. Even though we have 4 to his 3, the fact that he has 3 and we both have less than him, so he's the chieftain, and now in that case he would be the chieftain over 4 figures. So if you're ever the chieftain over 6 figures, you have satisfied a win condition. And finally, the last win condition is there are these tokens that can be placed on territories of the map called sanctuaries. They don't serve a purpose in the game other than to satisfy this win condition. And if you're ever in territories that combine to have 6 sanctuaries, these little like city-like tokens, then you have also achieved a win condition. Another interesting aspect is that once you've achieved a win condition, you don't automatically win. You have to, for a turn, for one of your actions, you have to claim what's called a pretender token. And if at the end of that round, you still satisfy that win condition, and if you've done that by yourself, if you're the only person to have the pretender token and satisfy a win condition, you win the game. There are some ways, if there's a tie, there are some rules that will sort of change that a little bit, but that's basically how the game works. Seasons of Inish. One of the issues I've had with this game, my biggest issue, I think, is that it just felt like it took too long. It felt like that pretender action, even though it's very interesting, it led to a lot of bash the leader. Immediately, whoever takes the pretender token has a target on them. You immediately want to attack them.
Yeah, and I think when you've achieved one of the 3 win conditions, it doesn't matter how many. One of the win conditions being in 6 territories. It doesn't matter if you're in 17 or 6. You've still achieved that.
Right.
So the tying and then the game continuing happens very frequently, because in a 4-player game with 3 conditions, everyone sort of spreads out. People are overlapping and everyone is in some state of 0, 1, or 2. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone have 3 of the victory conditions.
And so, in regard to the expansion that we played with, introduces a number of modules. I'm going to have Kellen help me out here because he's the one who has it. And
yes, so there are 5 modules in Seasons of Inish. Let's break that down. 15 new red...
Well, let's go thematically.
Oh.
5. There are 5 new modules.
Okay.
And one is a...
5th player
there you go.
expansion.
Thematic.
And I think that is the one that everyone is most excited about. That adds 4 new green action cards that are those base cards that everyone is drafting. So changing up a little bit of that core gameplay loop while still remaining really tight with that economy of cards. It adds a seasons module, which gives you a special action that happens during some seasons and a special bonus that you get between some seasons. It adds a new island expansion that adds the ability to make islands that are separate from the main area control that makes them harder to get to. It adds 15 new red cards, and the red cards are the LOL what the cards with all the crazy powers on them, which is awesome to add more variety to that. It also adds...
And this is the one I was the most excited about when I heard about it.
Yes, the We Want a King expansion, which limits the amount of rounds that can happen where people are tied. If people end up being tied in one of the rounds and they're not the Bren, which is the sort of the current king of the land, then that flips over to We Need a King, and that means that the next round will be the last round of the game. So it puts an end timer on the game, and it says this is for 5 players, but you can also use it with 4, 3, and 2 if you feel like the game needs that. And Inish is such a strange beast because the game could last 40 minutes and the game could last 4.5 hours, depending on the group that you play it with.
Yeah, and so we didn't get a chance to use the We Need a King, We Want a King, which is, again, was the one I was most excited about because it would end the game early.
A king emerged.
A king did emerge.
Well,
Who could say?
who could say?
What do you mean?
Who could say?
Let's check the log.
Depends how you define king. I guess...
Like an king?
No, if the way monarchies work is that the person who is the meanest and biggest and strongest rises to the top, then sure, a king emerged.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I would disagree with many of those superlatives, but so that never came into play. And so for me, I feel like I will enjoy Inish more with the expansion. And again, particularly this one aspect that'll make the game shorter, but I'm still not convinced I like Inish, despite the fact that all the parts of it sound great to me. It still is not clicking the way that I want to. I think I enjoyed this game more, maybe because the perception that it could not go too long because of that thing was always hovering above us. Like, if we ever got to that situation, it would end the next round. And I also enjoyed it more because I felt like I knew the cards a little bit more, these main action cards. I think it's fundamental to your enjoyment of the game, maybe, I don't know, that you have some idea of what cards can be in play. And I felt like I was a little more plugged into that, this being my third game of it, but I'm still not there yet. What did you guys think of Inish and Seasons of Inish?
Yeah, I can't stress enough the point that you just made, which is the more you play it and the better you know what all the options are in the card. Because I've now played this a bunch of times so that I know roughly what's available in the deck, and that just makes the game so much better because you spend less of your time trying to figure out what each card does. It's like, oh yeah, this card, I know what this does because I played it a bunch of times before. I think the specifics of the expansion that I liked the idea of the We Need a King tile, but again, it didn't come up in our game. Yeah. It was in danger of maybe coming up in the following round, but who can say? The island tiles were super interesting. These little isolated sections are separate from the mainland. It also adds harbors, which allow you to get across the land quicker. I like that a lot. I think it sort of gave you a lot more flexibility about where you could move, more interesting locations that were a little bit more isolated. At one point of the game, like Kellen absconds to this island and it makes it harder for us to get there. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they did a number of smart things here. And it's my least favorite type of expansion, which is the modular expansion. So I'm kind of eating crow a little bit to like it. I think as a rundown, adding more red cards to the deck of like possible crazy actions is awesome. Adding a fifth player, though we haven't played with it, I am totally on board for that personally. I think the islands are super great. I think sometimes the board play can feel incidental because people expand, and then you can kind of go close to anywhere, or you're this close to anywhere. With the islands, there are places that are much harder to get to, which I think is an upgrade. I think the Seasons makes it a little unnecessarily complicated.
Agreed.
It has some smart bits in it where it prevents a runaway leader from having 20 red you cards and makes you discard down to 3. It also has a little bit of some catch-up mechanisms in there. So it's interesting to evaluate that module from the space of what are they trying to do to the game with it.
Yeah, I mean, upon first blush, I would say that the Seasons module feels like something I would avoid in the future, unless I've found out through other people playing that it improves something. But for me, it just felt like tacked on and just overcomplicating the situation. I don't know what specifically how the new red cards work, but that seems like a cool thing. I love, again, the we want a king, we need a king thing, because I think that kills the primary negative I have. As far as fifth player, I don't think I'd ever want to play as five players. I really think that would be excruciating. Yeah,
so to put it succinctly, I think the expansion fixed all of the issues that we all had with it previously, minus the Seasons expansion. With it, again, we all agreed it was a little.
So we're saying that we always want to play Inish with Seasons of Inish without the Seasons in it.
Exactly.
Right. Precisely.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it was a ton of fun. I mean, I love Inish. I hadn't played in a while, but we had so many games of this previously where it just went on and on and on and on because it was the whole bash the leader issue and the leader kept changing. So I think, like I said, this expansion solved all of the issues that I had with Inish base game. I love games like this. I think the unique thing about Inish in comparison to other dudes on a map games, this game and also previous games of Inish, is the amount of negotiating. And this might be an R group specific thing, but I think there are so many rules situations that we were adjudicating, trying to determine kind of what was allowed. There were so many situations where I would see something that Neelan was about to do and I would say, wait, Neelan, we don't actually want this to happen because we want the game to continue or whatever it was. And then Neelan and I would kind of talk for a minute and then Neelan would take his action. And sometimes that did lead to somebody taking back a turn or halfway through a turn taking back what they were doing. And that felt unique, I think. It was a strange thing that we were having so much negotiation in a game that literally is not about negotiating at all.
Although I think this game definitely lends itself to negotiating because one of the rules is that when you're about to start a fight, you can both agree that we're not fighting. Instead of that move being a aggressive move, that it's as long as the players agree, it's a non-aggressive movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's a small but important change in Seasons of Inish when you play with We Want a King, We Need a King, which is that a shared victory is possible if from the first round where they tie, they then go into the next round. If still tied at the end of the game, they share that victory. Because Mark and I were in a position where we could almost get to that moment together, and I was more okay with both of us winning than neither of us winning. And so suddenly it felt a little like Cosmic Encounter, or a little like Dune, where I was contemplating whether I could win alone, and if I couldn't win alone, then maybe Mark and I could win together, and that facilitated even more table talk than you might otherwise.
So that does lead us nicely into our discussion for the week, but before we start getting deep into that, we want to read a review. Kellen, do you want to do the honors?
Yes, I do. So this review comes to us from Daddy Raves. Daddy Raws. That's a different.
Very different.
Very different. Neelan is known as Discipline Daddy on our Discord. If you want to join that at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, that is a chat room where you can hang out and chat with us and other listeners.
I would like to emphasize that Discipline Daddy was forced upon me. I did not take the mantle of Discipline Daddy.
But if you at Discipline Daddy, Neelan will respond.
That
You
is
can
also
tag
not
him.
of my doing.
All stuff, no fluff. Recently came across this podcast, couldn't be happier. Many board game podcasts feel far too much like they're a long commercial for games, or they feel like the hosts are too jaded or cynical. The BGB team are a great balance. The length of the show is great, and they deliver a new episode I can't wait to listen to quite often. They are most certain the number one podcast which features a South African accent.
That's accurate.
I thought you were from Australia.
Freaking, am I?
You're saying that there's no podcasts that come out of South Africa that are better?
Yeah, of course not.
actually not.
Why would you question that?
What do you,
You think
try
it's a
to
better
say?
podcast that comes out of South Africa than this one?
I'm just saying it might be disparaging to his home country.
No.
That I would be on the best podcast? No, how is that disparaging?
Yeah.
Out of the whole country?
Yeah,
There is no
easily.
chance. I'm saying it here for the record. It's a fact. There is no podcast that comes out of South Africa than this one.
And that's not even insulting South Africans, but we're just that good.
I mean, it's
But I
just
think-
a little presumptuous.
But I think one of us it might be jaded. I won't say who.
Okay, wait. This is a good hot question. I'm ready
We're
for
changing-
this.
we're changing
No,
the
no, no.
episode, yeah.
Neelan, can you help us?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're going to do a hot question.
All right, this is going to be a 4, 3, 2, 1, and then say
love
the
it.
name
I can't
of
wait.
who is the most jaded person.
Okay. Wait. Let me think about
Okay,
this. Give me
but
a
let's
second.
be clear.
No. Yeah.
Most jaded in terms of board games.
Yes. Most jaded in terms of board games. Okay. Hold on. Give me a second.
Can
Give
you
me a
vote
second.
for yourself?
No, you cannot vote for
No.
yourself. You absolutely cannot vote for yourself. Okay. Then my vote is ready.
3, 2, 1.
Kellen.
So 2 Kellens and 2 Marks.
All right.
Okay, I know why you think Mark, but I know why I think Kellen.
So explain.
Explain both?
No, explain.
Okay, you think Mark because...
No. I don't. Don't speak for me. Speak for yourself.
Okay. I don't think we should share this information, actually.
What?
Well, I don't know. You want the listeners to know that you're jaded and why?
Yeah, you're supposed to be fighting me.
Well,
That's what the people want.
that is what people want. I think Kellen can sometimes be jaded about all things in life. So this is hard because I feel like I'm a little bit at an advantage here, an unfair advantage. But I think it sometimes gets to this philosophical point where it's kind of like, well, but what is the point in anything, including board games? But like this conversation comes up in terms of board games. It also comes up in terms of like, why are we even doing the podcast? Because I'd rather be playing board games, but then what's the point in even playing board games if we're just doing it to talk about them? And it's a weird cyclical, I don't know.
On the other hand, Mark literally led us into an existential crisis a few weeks ago where he was like,
Damn right.
aren't all board games just basically the same?
They're all joy machines. They're all joy boxes.
I don't know how you can have a podcast about helping people pick good board games
Yeah.
and feel that way.
They're different levels.
Different levels of joy box.
Yeah, and different types, different flavors of joy box.
And also, Christina, I told you those things in confidence.
I didn't want to say, you made me. We are moving on to our topic of the week. Take-backs. Are they allowed? When are they allowed? How often? Who's allowed to adjudicate?
Why are they allowed?
Why are they allowed? Why do we play board games? Begin.
I think that the impetus for this spirited
You
discussion...
think the impetus for this?
Oh, my God. What? It's like 10 o'clock. Why would you, like,
You gotta keep on your
wordsmithing-
toes.
Okay.
Do you have to work tomorrow, Karen?
I do have to work tomorrow, and you don't, so I keep your mouth closed.
Yeah, I don't. I
So-
made that happen.
All right. So our group over the last 3 or so years that we've all been playing board games together is notorious for being quite slow. Slow both in the speed at which we play, slow in the amount of takebacks that we allow, and slow because the amount of meta negotiating and life philosophizing we do about whether there's any point to the game that we're playing. I have, over the last 6 months, started to voice and change my opinion on the amount of takebacks. My previous position on takebacks was, as long as no new information has been revealed, it's totally fine and we should be totally cool with allowing that. My new position is one of, Inish is not a 2.5 hour game, and it should not take 2.5 hours to play Inish, even with the optional expansion that is designed to lower the length of the game. Ergo, something that we're doing is wrong. I think that the amount of negotiating we do is the best part of playing board games from a socializing perspective. So every little take back is sort of a death by 1,000 cuts scenario for me, where each one may only be 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds add up to actual game time that we could just be living with our mistakes, allowing interesting situations to happen, and then playing them out. That is my TED Talk.
In contrast to that, on the other end of the spectrum, Neelan and I are the kind players. We understand that sometimes you have to clarify a rule, and clarifying a rule, maybe you voiced part of what you're going to do. Even if you've done that, then you see something, you're like, oh, I didn't know. I forgot that was a rule. We're pretty generous in saying like, hey, yeah, Mark, go ahead. No big deal. Take that back. Do your thing.
You know what isn't generous about that? Wasting someone's time.
And that's where I'm sort of so torn on this, because I'm inclined to agree with you, Christina, absolutely. Like, I think my gut reaction on this, and any time that this has come up in the past, it's like, let's do what's in the interest of not making people feel bad. And if someone's going to like be dejected for the rest of the game because they couldn't take back a thing that was substandard, then that sucks to sort of just have the table sit with that. But I'm now starting to lean towards Kellen's direction, where we maybe need firmer rules as to how long we're willing to slow down the game, just for the sake of like getting through it breezier. Because like Inish is the perfect example of this, where it's a game that's lauded for being fast. Yeah. And it does take us frequently longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I do think we're generous in both directions. So I think we're generous if I'm taking too long and then I suddenly realize I didn't do something right or I didn't know a rule, I'm fine to say, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Let's keep moving. And I think we all kind of play that way. We're all open to takebacks or not takebacks, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it really is about playing more generously, understanding, kind of like having a sense for what other people are doing and how fast other people are playing, what they're feeling, and using your judgment and your almost intuition on how other people are feeling to understand how you should be playing, like setting a rule at the beginning of the game and saying we should allow takebacks only if X, Y, and Z are in place. It just feels contrary to the spirit of entering into a game with people and agreeing to read them and interact with them and be kind in how you play.
I think having a pre-game talk where you stipulate like, hey, this is a game that takes us too long, or hey, we're running out, we don't have very much time, or hey, I want to play 3 games tonight. Let's just agree that we are not going to do take backs and try to get through it as fast as possible. Is probably a good way to do things. It feels a little overly formal. It seems like a weird thing, but I guess if your group adopted that would probably be the best way to handle things. I'm sort of torn on this too, because if somebody else makes a mistake or has a misplay, internally, I don't really feel any problem with having them take back, again, unless any new information has been revealed. That just is my gut reaction. But I think for a better experience for everybody, the idea would be that we should just deal with the mistakes and move forward. But it is hard, because I feel like for me, the line I would want to walk is, let's accept our mistakes unless somebody's like really going to be bothered by a misplay. But that's not a good line to have. Maybe a thing is like everybody gets one do-over. And no matter what, they can cash their do-over chip during the game, and they can do take back. Maybe that's
a bad idea. Yeah,
I solved it. End of podcast.
End of podcast. So I think there's a couple of particular flavors of this that are out there in the world. Some would say, I want to beat a player at their best and not when they make a mistake. How do you feel about that?
I get that, but that feels a little bit too much like we are going to redo every play until everybody makes the optimal play, and then what are we even doing? You know what I mean? Then we're not even playing. We're just like both figuring out a puzzle, and we're relying on luck or a group misplay to solve who the better player is. So I get that spirit. I understand that spirit, but I think in practice, you're not being the better player. You're just both figuring out the best move every step of the way.
I want to talk about like an interesting scenario that came up when Christina and I were playing Air, Land, and Sea.
Heroes of Air, Land.
Not Heroes of Air, Land, and Sea.
Air,
Land, and Sea. So this is something that Kellen pointed out after our game, is that there was a point in the game where Christina and I were literally being like, okay, well, if you do this, then this could happen. You might be able to win. If like, we're working through that. And Kellen is probably just sitting there thinking like, what are you guys doing?
What the hell is wrong with them? We're just like, okay, we're mathing this out. I know, blah, blah, blah. Let's help each other math this out real quick because we know we're going to. It just will be faster if we help each other.
That's interesting because, like, to me, that feels like a fun puzzle to sort of solve, even when you're in a competitive scenario. But, like, I get why that would be, like, anathema to the idea of, like, a competitive game.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, why is that only happening on the last 2 turns? You know, and at what point are you playing a board game together, or are you just solving a shared puzzle?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are specific games where we have, like, you start reaching the end game and everybody decides, I think Neelan's going to win. The game's over. Everybody knows the game is over. It's like this mutual understanding. It is getting to the end game faster because you know you've lost, right?
Yeah, if all it is at the end is a math calculation in Agricola, like, should I buy a vegetable or a cow in order to improve my score multiplier? You know, like, can we all do that math together versus forcing you to just figure it out on your own?
I think the way I would prefer to play games in general, in terms of specifically takebacks, is if we all played just accepting mistakes. The only problem is, though, I think our group, we have such a cutthroat nature about us, which I also love, but that heightens the gravity of every game. So I think you feel especially bad. Like, for example, as I just said, I would prefer if we all played just eat the mistakes and go on. But in our group, if Kellen, I'm just going to do the most likely scenario, Kellen makes a mistake.
Oh. Of course.
I love it. Sorry.
Was I your king earlier tonight, Mark?
You were never a king. He was never a king.
Where are you taught?
There was no king. We never even wanted a king. We never needed a king. Never happened.
This is some Quinn's level Inish.
Go ahead, Mark.
But so if in a game Kellen makes a mistake, that because he didn't calculate or because he made a mistake, again, this is very real to life. Sorry, I just felt like I just need to twist the knife a little bit. I won't do it anymore. Anyway, if Kellen makes a mistake that costs him the game, but it's a mistake, and we all sort of realize the mistake, that's not the way I'd want to win. He would feel bad because he made a mistake, but it would lessen the game as a whole to me.
But isn't that just a perception thing, right? Because any other turn that I didn't make the optimal move was a mistake.
Right.
And it's just a much more like perception.
And maybe that's why my solution is so good about where you get one take back. Because if you
made a game, so good, Mark.
Get this. Because if you made the one critical mistake, you could cash in your trademark take back chip and take it back.
So I'm ready to change Board Game Barrage forever.
Let's do it.
Right now, like we do a 3-2-1 and vote yay or nay. Christina has no vote.
I thought you guys had half of it.
Yeah, you have one.
No. Okay. When she is on the podcast, that does not split my third of the
Votes
ownership.
are by household, not by person.
I have a quarter vote.
This is not true. But I do have a second hot question, but I won't make Neelan
He has to
do it because it's disparaging to him and Christina. The scary thing, the fear in the future, right? Because time is a precious thing and you should never waste it. In the words of Gene Wilder. Immortal Gene Wilder.
Isn't he dead?
He's in my heart, Mark. I fear that implementing this, because I'm ready to implement it, right? Like we're holding hands under the table. Well, we're not calling it that. It's not a Mark. The Mark one thing. But I fear that we have 2 turn turtles here. So if you've heard that term, it's similar to bugbear, but it's actually a good term. That Neelan and Christina take a very long time on their turns.
I want to throw Mark into the mix.
No!
We're doing this.
Incorrect. Go on.
Well, today's game, he did take particularly long time.
I
Longer than Neelan. Yeah, I guess we did.
If I'm a cheetah and you are turn turtles, Mark...
I'm a leopard, at least.
Mark is a leopard. I'll agree to that. High five.
No.
I worry that implementing this rule will slow down our turn turtles so that their feetsies are covered in glue.
Right.
Wait, implementing the one take back rule?
Because
You'd be less willing to take back your turn.
no,
I mean,
More
you,
scared about it.
Yeah,
More
yeah,
nervous.
you'd be more nervous to take a turn and therefore think longer. How do you think that implementing this rule will affect you, Christina?
No, I think it's a good rule. I think it's a good solution. And I think we're done talking. Just kidding. I think I'm not answering your question, by the way.
What? You cannot answer a hot question.
That wasn't a hot question. If it's
question.
not a hot question, there are no rules. Okay, so I think one interesting that we've talked about, because this has come up before. What
Ignoring
if?
it?
Yeah. What if we played a game, any game, and just for fun to try it, we implemented a timer and you just sped through a game just to take it to the opposite end, just to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Everybody's on an even playing field, because I think that's kind of what Kellen has said before. It's like Neelan and I, if we're agreeing, I mean, who
Which
knows?
we are,
Who
which we
could
are,
say?
go on, yeah.
Who could say? Yeah. If we are taking longer turns, we have an advantage in the game because we are spending more time to make a more optimal move every single time. So you could say just start playing better and taking more optimal turns, Kellen. But you could also say, let's try to do this super, super fast and see what happens. I think that would be fun. But it's kind of going back to what Mark said way earlier about, like, if you're entering a game and you know you only have an hour and you're trying to play Inish, like, why are you even here? I mean, sure, if that's what we've all agreed to, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do a really fun, fast game just to try it and see what happens, see what changes, that's great. But if you're entering into an agreement to play a game with people and you know roughly how long it takes and you know roughly how these people play, I think you kind of have to be a little bit forgiving to the way they play and the length of time that it probably will take. Is it wasting time to play games? Because that's what I'm hearing, Kellen.
Jaded son of a bitch.
I think that you have to have an understanding of the players that you're playing with. You know, when you know that you're going to be playing a game with Mark, you know that he's going to be ultra competitive Spike and will do whatever necessary to win the game. When you play a game with Callan Allen, you know that you're playing with a little bit of an that will do specific douchebaggery moves to make big splashes, but also kind of mean. That's just how it goes. And I do think that that's a consideration when you play games with the two of you. You know, I think that our play, for example, of Dominant Species, I actually think I might like Dominant Species, but our play of it was hindered by a turtle, and he wasn't even playing, you know, the turtles in the game. He was playing the birds. Like, that game may have been extended by, like, hours. And so, like, yes, when you agree to play the game, yeah, I'm not saying change who you are, man. I'm just saying you should be as considerate as someone
totally.
else.
No, I 100% concede that if I'm entering into a game with you, I know that it bothers you if I take more than 30 seconds for turn. Anyways.
It specifically bothers me.
No. I'm cognizant of it, okay? And so I will try, if I feel like, oh, I have taken a couple turns longer than everyone else at the table, I'm going to start playing faster. Period. Like, I totally get that that's part of it.
And I think that's, in my mind, like the biggest takeaway here is exactly that, is whatever you decide to do, whatever you agree to do, as long as you're doing that with the consideration of other people at the table, kind of at all points, like whether or not you've made some sort of upfront agreement or not, reevaluate how you're playing based on how your perception of the game is going for other people.
But in contrast to that, you can't just like change the way you're playing or the things that are bothering you because it's getting closer to the end of the game and now you're about to win and you don't want people to, it can't be like, okay, suddenly takebacks aren't okay.
Sure.
So
like there has to be some structure to what you decide.
Like, yes, read the game, read the room, read the people, but you also have to be willing to play by the rules of the game. Okay, but actually, to answer your question, because that was rude, I do agree with what you're saying. I think that it's a good implementation. I think it would change the way the game feels because there's less looseness, there's less freedom, there's less, we're talking, I'm giving you advice, you're giving me advice, everybody's having fun and being nice. And there is a little bit more tension because you're thinking, oh, I literally cannot take back anything. I mean, you'd have to talk about the specifics, but so yes, I think it would probably make me take longer turns and I would have to work on that because it's not a good thing. But at the same time, I think it would solve enough of our other problems, maybe that it would be worth it. I don't know. What do you think, Neelan?
I would be definitely willing to try it. Like, I think it would change the way that we play in a way that would just be interesting. Like, just the idea of like, no, I'm stuck with it now because we've agreed that if I don't have this chip, it's done. I think that's really, really cool.
And Nealon previously said that the biggest takeaway was something else. I forgot what he said, but I think the biggest takeaway from this episode should be that you can buy a 4-pack of Mark chips at BoardGameBarrage.com/Mark chips. We sell 4-pack for $5.
And all proceeds go directly to Mark.
That's right.
Of the
Mark Mass
aforementioned
Paid Fund.
Mark back. So at what point are you taking back a move? We got to sort this out.
Yeah,
right?
like at what point are you allowed to take back a turn?
Correct. It's obviously still before new information has entered the system.
Yes.
After that, you can't do it.
Right.
But if you are saying, well, I might go here, and if you move your piece onto a new territory in a Dudes on a Map game, that would count as your take back if you took that back?
If you're considering your action.
And you're kind of moving things around,
then
that's
it's fine.
totally fine.
You're still
what about the
normal
chess? Like you have to hold on to the dude?
No, I don't think so. Unless that's been agreed upon. But I think
what do you not? You don't agree?
No, our games are getting less and less fun.
Yeah, no, I think like if you actually take your move and no new information has come out, but you realize before the other player's taking their turn that you want to use your Mark chip, you're then allowed.
Does this have your face or your tank on it?
Depends on the side.
Face on one side,
Heads on one
the
side,
other.
which is me, and then tails is the tank.
Yep.
Mark chip
Disgusting.
at
All right.
Barrage.com.
Let's end this out before Mark invents more
Okay,
products
so-
to sell you.
$4 for $5. $4 for $5. $4 for $5.
Oh my God, this is not a hot question, but
God.
are we going to implement the Mark chip?
Yes.
Well, we're not going to be calling it the
Well,
Mark chip.
it must be.
Yes.
It must be. I'm making these chips.
Just
We
end the
can
show,
just call them
please.
green chips. Okay, but answer the question.
Yes.
We're going to do it?
100%.
Okay, we're going to report back
Yes.
how it affects our gameplay.
Well,
I'd be
you're
able to
not.
see.
I want my vote back to 1/3.
So I think that's going to wrap up our discussion today. As always, you can find a Board Game Barrage on all of the social platforms like Instagram and Twitter and all the others. Do I have to say all of them? Okay. And also Discord. You can come talk to us on Discord. I started talking because they added a books channel. And so it's fun. Everybody's nice. BoardGameBarrage.com/Discord. Come talk. Leave a review if you want. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be 5 stars. It's all cool.
Well, you're new
honest.
at this. You're new at this. You do have to leave a review, and it must be 5.
Be honest. You can leave a review anywhere you find your podcasts.
But also on iTunes.
Oh,
There's no
is it
iTunes.
better on iTunes?
No,
Apple
Apple
Podcast.
It's still called iTunes on my
In your
computer.
heart.
In Kellen's
Along
heart.
with Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder and iTunes remain in Kellen's heart.
As immortal beings.
That's right.
As always, we'd like to thank Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from the album Wake the Queens. Intro and outro song. It's great. We sing it all the time offline, off the air. Anything else, guys?
Nope, that's it.
Everything? That's everything?
That's it.
Okay.
BoardGameBarrage.com/Mark BoardGameBarrage.com/Mark
Oh, no.
Buy them. 4 for
No,
$5.
no, no.
4 for $5.
No. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Buy Mark chips.
Kellen, are you intentionally chewing into the microphone?
People love that.
You're a monster.
Eat.
They like
Just
your
trying.
dice, not your
I'm trying to live up to the expectation that I've set.
the expectation.
Yeah, like the Grouch. I think I'm mixing up the Sesame Street people because there's like the Cookie Monster guy and then the Grouch that no one likes that lives in the trash can.
Right.
And I'm
So
sort of...
both the Cookie Monster and the Grouch.
That's
You're a-
right.
Yeah, grouchy monster.
What episode number is this?
Of Sesame Street, they're on a lot of them.
I'm going to be talking about Menara. Wait, what?
Oh, am I
You weren't
supposed to
invited
say?
to talk
Oh,
by
yes. You
Chris
weren't
out of Blue
invited yet.
Tank.
Nealon.
Did you introduce us
Oh,
as
I didn't
Tank?
introduce you guys.
Oh,
okay,
my
sorry.
God.
Sorry.
This is
I
gonna be
was
such
so
a tough
nervous.
editing job.
I was, yeah, sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay. What's on Your Mind, Kid, from the album Wake the King?
Wake the Queen.
Wake the Queen.
I love the line, I told you that in confidence. It's like
Yeah.
from either a movie
It's
or
from
something.
Arrested Development.
I've said it a lot.
I think either Michael or Job says it.
It was a Callan Allen original.
Hell no.
Yeah. I recently learned that, well, this is not true. I hadn't watched all of Arrested Development, and I'd already been dating Kellen for a long time, and he had I thought he was so funny. And then I watched Arrested Development. I watched all of Arrested Development, and I realized that all of his jokes are literally stolen from Arrested Development. And as we're watching, I'm just having this realization every episode. I'm looking at him just like, man, I thought I knew you. But really, I just knew
I
Michael
guess
Bluth.
It's about time to
Job.
be hitting the old dusty trail.
What? Are you breaking up with me live on air?
It's a callback to season 1, episode 1. Actually, I think it's only in the
Wait.
extended edition. So,
Oh. Take backs. Should you be able to take them back?
Perfect. Good. Got it.
No.
gotcha.
Should you be able to take them back?